The ocean stretches endlessly. The sun burns like fire. A pirate ship drifts across the blue, its crew weak from hunger. The smell of rot hangs in the air. Barrels of meat have spoiled. Bread is filled with insects. The water tastes like salt and decay, months at sea, and still they survive. No fridge, no ice. No fresh markets, just salt, smoke, and rum. For pirates, the real enemy wasn't the Navy or rival crews, it was time. Every meal was a battle against heat, hunger, and rot. One mistake and the crew could starve or fall sick. Yet these men found ways to keep their food edible for months. Strange, clever, and sometimes disgusting ways. This is how pirates kept themselves alive, in a world where the ocean tried to kill them every single day. But to understand how they survived, we have to step aboard their world, a world built on danger, hunger, and salt. Being a pirate wasn't just about treasure or battles. It was about survival. Life at sea was rough, and food was the hardest part of it all. Out on the open ocean, there were no markets, no farms, and no fresh supplies. Once a ship left port, what they carried was all they had, until they found another ship to raid. The days were hot, the nights were cold, and the salty wind spoiled everything it touched. Bread turned hard as stone. Meat rotted within days. Water went bad, crawling with algae and worms. The smell below deck was enough to make a man sick, but giving up wasn't an option. Pirates had to keep moving, keep raiding, keep living, so they learned tricks. Old sailor secrets passed from one crew to another. Clever ways to keep food from spoiling, even under a blazing sun. And this is where their real challenge began. Not the battles, but the daily war against rot, thirst, and time. The Caribbean heat was brutal. Inside a ship's wooden hull, the air was thick, damp, and hot. The perfect place for food to rot. Most pirate ships didn't have proper kitchens. They had a small fire pit called a galley, but cooking was dangerous. One spark could burn the whole ship down. So meals had to be simple, safe, and easy to store. Fresh fruits and vegetables were rare. Meat was salted, fish was dried, and bread was baked rock hard to last longer. The crew carried barrels of water, but even that didn't stay fresh for long. After weeks, it turned green and slimy. There were no second chances. If food spoiled, the crew starved. So pirates used what nature gave them, sun, wind, salt, and smoke, to fight decay and stretch every meal a little longer. But even with all their planning, the ocean had its own plans. Supplies ran out, and the true horror of life at sea began. Weeks at sea could turn paradise into punishment. The ocean was endless, and the horizon offered nothing but more water. The air below deck grew thick with the stench of salt meat and sweat. A pirate's biscuit, known as hardtack, could break a man's teeth. It was baked until it was rock hard, meant to last months. But by the time it reached the crew, it was often crawling with tiny worms. Some men closed their eyes and ate anyway. Others dunked the biscuit in water or rum, hoping not to see what floated out. The salted beef and pork weren't much better. After weeks in the heat, the meat turned dark, slimy, and sour. Pirates sometimes soaked it in seawater to wash off the rot. A useless effort, but it made them feel less helpless. Then came the water. Barrels filled on shore with clean, fresh water soon turned foul. The wood leaked. Algae grew. Worms floated on top. Some pirates strained it through cloth. Others mixed it with rum to kill the taste. Day after day, the crew grew weaker. Hunger made men angry. Thirst made them desperate. Morale rotted faster than the food itself. But pirates didn't quit. Desperation forced creativity. Somewhere between hunger and survival, they learned how to fight nature and win. They found ways to dry meat in the sun, smoke fish above their tiny galley fires, and steal barrels of pickled food from merchant ships. It wasn't luxury, but it was life. Out on the ocean, surrounded by salt and heat, these small tricks meant everything. A single barrel of preserved food could decide who lived to see another shore, and who fed the sharks. And somehow, the pirates survived. They always did, not because of luck, but because of something tougher, ingenuity. They learned to twist nature's rules, to make rot pause just long enough to stay alive. Their ship was a floating laboratory of desperation, and their experiments became legend. Every trick they learned was written not in ink, but in pain, tested by hunger, refined by storms, and shared in whispers between crews. What began as survival slowly turned into knowledge, and that knowledge started with the simplest, most powerful weapon they had, the salt. Salt was the ocean's most precious gift. To a pirate, a barrel of salt could be worth more than silver. It turned fresh meat into something that could last months, maybe more, if packed right. When pirates captured ships, they always searched for salt first. Without it, even the richest haul meant nothing if the food spoiled. The process was simple but cruel. They sliced the meat into slabs, packed it in barrels, and layered it with coarse sea salt until every piece was buried. Then they sealed the lid tight with tar or wax to block air and moisture. The salt drew out water from the meat, killing the bacteria that caused rot. The result? A hard, dry, salty mass that barely looked edible. When it was time to eat, the crew had to boil it, sometimes twice, to soften it and wash away the thick salt. Even then it tasted terrible, but it was safe. And safety mattered more than taste. Pirates joked that their beef was so tough it could stop a musket ball. They laughed because they had to. There was nothing else to laugh about on those endless days at sea. But when salt wasn't enough, pirates turned to smoke, a slower, more patient weapon. Whenever they anchored near an island or sandbar, the crew set up campfires along the shore. Above the glowing coals, they built racks from branches or old planks, hanging strips of fish, turtle meat, or pork. For hours and sometimes days, the smoke curled around the food, drying it out and coating it in a thin, dark crust. The smoke itself acted like a natural preservative, driving away flies and slowing decay. The smell clung to everything, their clothes, their hands, the deck of the ship, but it meant survival. A few pirates even smoked food aboard the ship, using small galley fires built in metal boxes filled with sand. It was risky. One wrong spark could destroy everything. But they did it anyway. In the heavy silence of the sea, that thin line of smoke rising into the sky was a sign of life. But even smoke had its limits. Freshness was fleeting, and the ocean offered no gardens, no orchards, only salt and sun. Pirates knew that without fruits and greens, sickness would strike as surely as cannon fire, so they turned to another kind of magic, one that could trap time inside a barrel. Without vitamins, pirates faced a slow, painful death from scurvy, a disease that made gums bleed and teeth fall out. The cure was simple: vitamin C found in citrus and fresh produce. But on a ship, fresh didn't exist. So pirates found another way. They began to pickle. Whenever they raided a merchant ship or a coastal town, they took barrels of vinegar, brine, and pickled vegetables. Anything soaked in vinegar could last for months. They even learned to pickle strange things: eggs, fruits, even onions and cabbage, anything that could survive the voyage. The sour taste wasn't just refreshing, it was life-saving. Some pirates also discovered that citrus juice, especially from limes and oranges, could prevent scurvy. Captains who carried these fruits, or stored their juice in sealed barrels, often kept their men healthier for longer. Over time, lime juice became as valuable as gold to sailors. The British Navy would later adopt the same trick, earning their sailors the nickname limeys. But pirates were already using it long before it became official. Yet for all their clever tricks with salt, smoke, and citrus, there was one thing that truly kept their spirits alive: a liquid that warmed their blood, numbed their hunger, and turned misery into laughter. It wasn't just drink. It was defiance poured into a cup. Rum was more than a drink. It was survival in a bottle. Water, no matter how clean it started, never stayed fresh. Stored in wooden barrels, it absorbed the taste of the wood, grew algae, and turned foul after a few weeks. But rum never spoiled. Pirates mixed it with their bad water to kill the taste and bacteria. Some even used it as a disinfectant for wounds or as a crude painkiller. When food supplies ran low, rum was also a morale booster, a way to forget hunger, if only for a few hours. It kept spirits high and sickness low. And sometimes that was enough to keep a crew from mutiny. Of course, too much rum caused problems of its own. Drunken pirates made dangerous sailors. Smart captains rationed it carefully, enough to lift spirits but not enough to cause chaos. Rum was the sea's medicine, and pirates treated it like liquid gold. But even rum couldn't fill an empty stomach. There came a point when the barrels ran dry, the salted meat vanished, and the only resource left was the wild sea itself. Out there, survival meant becoming part of the hunt, taking from the ocean what it refused to give freely. The sea was full of food, if you knew how to catch it. Pirates fished with crude lines and hooks, spearing anything that moved: tuna, snapper, Even sharks, they hunted sea turtles when they could. A valuable catch that provided meat, eggs, and even oil for their lamps. Turtles were easy to store alive, stacked upside down on deck for days until needed. Coconuts, mangoes, and breadfruit came from the islands they raided or hid near. Some pirates learned from native islanders how to cook and preserve these fruits, drying them in the sun or soaking them in rum. They didn't waste a thing. Bones were boiled for broth. Leftover fat was melted into oil. Even spoiled meat could be turned into stew if cooked long enough. A pirate's stomach wasn't picky. Survival didn't allow it to be. However, survival wasn't just instinct. It was intelligence. Over time, pirates became more than scavengers. They became students of the sea, learning from every culture, every stolen ship, every storm survived. They stole not just goods, but knowledge. From Spanish merchants, they learned new ways to cure meat. From African sailors, they learned about spices and how some could slow decay. From Caribbean natives, they discovered tropical fruits and ways to smoke fish using palm, leaves, and coconut husks. Every pirate ship became a melting pot of ideas, bits of wisdom from every corner of the world. Some captains even enforced rules about food preservation. Barrels had to be checked weekly. Water casks were kept out of direct sunlight. Fires were managed carefully to avoid setting the ship ablaze. It was rough discipline, but it worked. Pirates didn't have scientists or chefs, but through experience and shared knowledge, they became experts in staying alive. And what they practiced we now know as basic food science. Salt removes moisture, stopping bacteria. Smoke created a coating that preserved meat. Vinegar and rum acted as acids that prevented decay. They didn't know the science, and they just knew the results. In their world, every method had been tested by hunger. If it didn't work, men died. The ocean didn't forgive mistakes. What's remarkable is that many of their techniques are still used today, in jerky, pickles, and smoked meats. Centuries later, the pirates' struggle shaped the food preservation methods we still rely on. They turned survival into innovation, proof that necessity really is the mother of invention. But even with all these tricks, life at sea never got easy. Preserved food filled their bellies, but it came with a cost. Salt-bloated bodies, rotting teeth, constant thirst. Fresh food was a dream they tasted only when they reached land. Every meal reminded them of how fragile life was. Every mouthful of salted meat tasted like the price of freedom. Yet they chose it. The ocean, the danger, the endless hunger, because it gave them something land could not. Freedom. In the silence between waves, when the smoke from the galley drifted into the night sky, pirates weren't just criminals or killers. They were survivors. Men who beat hunger, disease, and decay with nothing but grit and willpower. They weren't just masters of the sea. They were masters of endurance. Out on the endless ocean, every wave was a test. Every sunrise meant one more day survived. The pirates who ruled these waters weren't just fighters or thieves. They were survivors of a world that tried to break them. They faced hunger, heat, storms, and sickness with nothing but salt, smoke, and stubborn will. Their meals were simple, their lives brutal, but their story still echoes through time. When we think of pirates, we imagine gold and glory, roaring cannons and flying flags. But the real story was quieter. It lived in the crack of hardtack, in the sting of salt on their tongues, in the small fire that kept a ship alive through the night. In those moments, survival was treasure enough. They didn't have technology, comfort, or safety, only knowledge carved from hardship. And that knowledge, passed through centuries, reminds us of something timeless. Even in the harshest places on Earth, humanity finds a way to endure. The pirates didn't just conquer the sea. They conquered time, one preserved meal at a time.